Welcome back. Counter culture. Talked about a million things this morning, so my head is racing all around, and I'm gonna have a step behind. So you may have to help me out, Pastor Mark, on this whole thing. I've got a question for you, but let me frame it with this. In Judges, chapter 8 is the story of Gideon, part of the story of Gideon, right? And Gideon is tapped out by God to do an amazing work, right? He and 300 men rout an entire, army. It's actually God who does all the work, and they get the credit, for it. But on return, after chasing the enemy, there's this little part in 8 that hit me. It says this: Then the men of Ephraim.
What verse?
Oh, sorry, verse 1 of chapter 8. Says, Then the men of Ephraim said to him, What is this that you have done to us? Not to call us when you went to fight against Midian. And they accused him fiercely, and they said to them, What? And he said to them, What I have done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? God has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger against him subsided when he said this. So we have this problem. God taps Gideon out for a job. God tells Gideon exactly what to do. And then other people hear of how God used Gideon and they feel left out. Right? And they come against Gideon, but they're not really coming against Gideon. They're coming against really what God told Gideon to do, right? So we run into this all the time, right? I ran into this recently. And as Christians, we have a hard time when we find out information secondhandly or later than other people, right? We're constantly asking this question: why didn't you tell me, Pastor Mark? Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Why didn't you tell me you had this problem? Why didn't you tell me, and then we spiritualize it and we say, why didn't you tell me, Pastor Mark? We would have been praying for you, right? But really what we've done in that moment is we've made it about us, right? I feel left out that you didn't tell me something. So and rather than focusing on what's going on, right? So a practical example would be a lot of times in our churches, we have people get sick. They call you and I, and they say, hey, Pastor, just want you to know I'm in the hospital, or I got to go to the hospital, I'm sick. And they specifically tell us not to tell other people, or we choose not to tell other people. But then other people find out about it, and they come to us, and rather than saying, hey, what's wrong with this person? How can we help with this person? What do they need? They say to us, why didn't we know about it? Why didn't you tell us about it? We would have prayed for them. Why didn't you tell us about it? So in this countercultural world where we feel like we're entitled to information all the time, and then we make things all about us all the time, how do we focus on what's most important, right? If someone is sick, if someone's struggling, if someone's going through a hard time, is it more important that we knew about it, or more important that when we find out about it, we're actually helping and lifting up that person?
There's a lot there, what you just said.
Yep.
Here's some... All right, I don't even know where to begin. Sometimes it's not our story to tell.
Yep.
Sometimes people, they don't necessarily want everybody to know.
Yep.
Because there is so much information, I don't want anybody to know this. Sometimes it gets out that, well, boy, my mind's going all over. You got me. This is an interesting story.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go here.
You just go.
I think what's funny is, why don't you tell us? We wanted on the action.
Yep.
We wanted to go.
Especially since it's a victory. And
And
there's going to be...
We wanted to be part of that.
Yeah.
Which is a cool thing that we see someone having some success. Man, that's cool. I want to see. There's a buddy of mine said, someone was telling me how they led someone to the Lord. Like, God, I want some of that action. I want to lead someone to the Lord. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do it because we want their glory. We want to be a part of someone else's story because our story is not worth telling. We don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to tell your story. And how many of us tell other people's stories because we don't think our story is worth telling?
Yep.
So there's a couple ways of looking at this. Sometimes we're taught not to burden people with our burdens, or we have this false humility. Well, I didn't want to burden you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then they get mad. I've had people get mad at me. Well, Pastor, I was in the hospital for 3 days and you never came and told me. Well, I was at district assembly. Well, you should have known. What am I supposed to do? Call the Psychic Friends hotline to find out? Well, so and so knew. I've had someone tell this. I'm speaking out of experience. Well, so and so knew. I said, well, they never said anything. Then they chewed out that person because they didn't tell me. And I said, why didn't you tell me?
Where's your responsibility?
Where's your responsibility in this? It shouldn't take someone else to say, well, we need to pray for someone. No, we have a prayer meeting on Wednesdays. Things come up. Hey, we're going to pray for this person. Okay, and they know. I asked them, can we pray for you? Yeah, pray for me at your prayer meeting. That's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we feel like we have to do it because it makes us feel better.
Yep.
And we need to just say, wait a minute here. That person needs to ask for help. We teach kids in school, don't ask for help. Don't look off your neighbor's paper. Don't ask your friend for help. And then we put them in the job world, the career world, whatever you want to call it, and say, okay, now you got to work as a team. Wait a minute. No, I've spent 18 years being told don't share my work because someone's going to steal it. Now you want me to work as a team. So there's this weird stuff, and then there's this stuff that we're just at least from a pastoring perspective, we're just supposed to know. Or someone gets mad. Well, didn't you know that I was sick? No, I didn't. Well, I didn't. Why didn't you tell me? So that because I could be because I don't know what's going on with you. Well, I wasn't in church for a week. Okay. Well, some people miss church but it doesn't. We get very selfish sometimes. Mm-hmm. I get, well, why didn't Andy call me and tell me that? I just talked to a friend of mine yesterday, and he was on his way to his home because his dad's not doing well. And he said to me, I about bawled. He said, when you were dealing with your mom, Mark, he goes, I was dealing with my mom. He goes, but I couldn't get away. I was in Illinois. He goes, I was going to come out for your mom's funeral. You know what that meant to me?
Yeah.
Just the thought that he had thought about it meant the world to me. That he was going to do that. But, I could sit here and get, well, so-and-so didn't even acknowledge that my mom did. Well, did I tell him? Sometimes we get accused. People get upset because we don't know. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us? And yeah, there is a piece of it. It's like, because I want to know. And, it's a gossip thing. Of course, Christians don't, they don't worry. They just get very concerned.
Well, what would you do?
They don't gossip. They just share prayer requests, but you know what I mean.
I think I think this is a fascinating thing because we live in this media world where we just assume everybody knows everything about everybody because you got an internet and you got Facebook and you got all this stuff. And the truth of the matter is, again, what it ought to do is it ought to make us stop and reflect on our relationship with people, right? Okay. If I don't know what's going on with a certain person, right, then that probably says something about my relationship with that person, right? Mm-hmm. And so rather than me demanding that we have a relationship that we don't have,
yes,
right? So if you're a person and you don't have a relationship with your pastor such that you would tell them when you need them to pray, to pray for you and all these things, that says a lot about the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. You need to look at that and check and say, why am I upset that this person didn't tell me?
Exactly.
Am I in relationship with that whole thing? Right. And I think about that today, like in our culture in general, right? We have these vast groups of friends on Facebook and stuff, but we're not really in relationship.
I can't imagine people with I look at like some of the people I'm friends with on Facebook. Why they have 2,000, 3,000 friends? I'm like, no, you don't.
No,
you do not have.
You have 2,000 or 3,000 people who know you.
Who know you, but maybe you maybe I have 200 people that I kind of, I got 50 at the church and I got a few down here and, maybe 100 people that I can keep track of what's going on. Do I know certain people? Sure I do. I think what's fascinating with this story too, and I think there's another aspect. Here's what came to my mind when I read it. Why didn't you tell us? And when someone has had success or a great spiritual height, we want to rush right in and get a piece of the action.
Absolutely.
And so what I see, and what does Gideon say? He goes, yeah, but you guys have done all this.
Yeah, look at what you've done.
Look what God did with you. This was what God did with me. And so we think, oh, well, crying out loud, Mark's down here at Drash, and he's doing videos. Oh, I want to do that because that's where we get that all the time, and all through COVID. Well, here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to do so you can stay relevant. And I get that, and then they'll turn around and say, but the Sunday morning service will always be there.
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe that's all I can do.
Yeah.
Maybe that's all I can do.
Yeah.
Do I have to be? Be yourself. Everybody else is taken. So Andy can say, well, I want to be like Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, he's already taken, and it's a big. You don't want to be Mark. Okay, trust me. And we can then what it leads to is then we can start criticizing.
Yeah.
Well, here's what you should have. You mean shoulds and oughts. That's a shaming thing. So here's what you should. No, wait a minute. There's the wonderful scene in a river runs through it when the two brothers have just gone down the river and the rapids and stuff, and they come back and the one's really stressed out and he's trying to just get his emotions together. The other one, he's making a sandwich and the other one starts putting, what you need on there is sardines, and he starts messing up his sandwich. Don't be getting about my sandwich. So here's what you need to do, Andy.
Yeah.
No, maybe I don't. Maybe I don't.
I think
because I'm not Andy.
Yep. Well, I think that's the point here. Right?
Yeah.
Who's Gideon? Gideon got success. Why? Because God gave it to him.
Yeah.
This is a God thing.
Exactly.
This isn't. This wasn't a Gideon decided to go fight him and invite some of his friends to do this. It was God set this all up.
Right.
Right. And told him all these things. I think sometimes we underestimate that. I do believe that there are times where God says to people, "Don't share your story right now. Don't share what I'm doing in your life right now. Don't share how I'm doing it," because people, they're not ready for it. They're not listening. They're not hearing, right? I think there are people right now in our culture that, God has them on a very specific kick, right? And again, there's a whole audience of people who are like, yeah, but no, we're on this kick and we're on this kick and I don't want to hear about this kick. And there's a reason sometimes God says, just keep that for yourself for a moment, right? At the right time, I'm going to release it and I'm going to tell you those things. But sometimes we force things on people.
Yeah. Well, or you're a pastor, so here's what you should do.
Yeah.
You're not a successful pastor because your church is not big. It's not growing.
Well, we run it. We run to churches like that, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has a little bit of success, and we're like,
I was dealing with this morning.
To do that.
Someone told me yesterday, well, I had to get my kids to a church where there was a youth group and a children's. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, my church doesn't. We have that, but it's probably not to the capacity. And I started going through this comparison thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Yep. My church has its strengths, and that's okay. Because if there's one thing we learned in church during the pandemic is we can't do everything.
Yeah.
So do what you can do.
Do what God tells you to do.
Do what God tells you to do. And how about these other guys rejoicing with him?
Yeah.
But they didn't rejoice with him. Man, why didn't you tell us we to come and help me? I had to do this. God told me to do it. He didn't tell us to do it. He didn't tell me to go tell you. I had to go do this thing. Can you just celebrate with me?
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Can you just celebrate with me?
Why do you need to know all the details? Can you just pray with me? Can you just celebrate with me? Can you just support me?
How many, in my tradition, people come down to the altar.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will just go down and I'll just pray with them silently.
Yeah.
And if they look up and they make eye contact with me, is there something I can pray about specifically for you?
Yeah. But if not,
Pastor, just your being here is okay. That's all I need to know.
I love that.
How about that's not all bad.
So in a world where information, is the God that we worship, we gotta know. Have you heard is the phrase in church and out of church, right? Have you heard about? Sometimes it's better for us to be about what God's doing, right? Not about all the gossip about who God's using to do it, right? Or who God is doing something in, not exactly what he's doing in them, right? Like there's those things that we got to be really careful about. I like that.
Can it suffice that I see God working?
Yeah.
I see God working in their life.
Yeah, and sometimes joining God in that is just pray, right? I don't need to know all the details, right? I'm just glad to know that we need to be praying for you.
Absolutely.
Love it. All right. Hey, we will see you next time on Counterculture.
Grace and peace.